Right. And that's another thing is this is such a collaboration when you're writing a novel, when you're writing a book, typically, unless you're ghostwriting, like I do that too, but typically my own stuff is just me in my office,
Right.
writing down my own stuff. And I love working with critique partners because they do that for me too, as far as, making comments and suggestions that maybe it didn't occur to me, or I'm not reading this in this way. Is this what you meant?
Yeah.
So that's always useful and helpful. But in general, the point I'm trying to make is that novel writing is very like solitary, and collaborating on something like a screenplay is such a team effort.
Welcome to Story Power, a bi-monthly podcast where my guests and I chat about stories and creativity in all different styles and formats. My name is Lucinda Sage-Midgorden, and my goal is to promote what Dale Carnegie stated in his famous book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. He said, instead of condemning people, let's try to understand them. Let's try to figure out why they do what they do. That's a lot more profitable and intriguing than criticism, and it breeds sympathy, tolerance, and kindness. To know all is to forgive all. It's my firm belief that the goal of most creative people is to try to understand themselves and others. That's what makes artwork of all kinds so compelling. But more than that, the personal stories of my guests promote understanding as well. Roger C. Schenck, a cognitive scientist, said, human beings are not ideally set up to understand logic. They are ideally set up to understand stories. It's my hope that Story Power will help us understand each other better by sharing the stories of my guests. So today I am talking to Lisa Jensen. And it's episode 85. I can't believe we're that far along. And Lisa and I had a conversation at one point from my Patreon community. And I was just so excited to talk to you, Lisa, that I wanted to put you on Story Power too. So you just now, before we started recording, said you're really busy. Do you want to tell the listeners what you do?
I do a whole lot of things. I ghostwrite, I write novels under a pen name, and I recently started screenwriting. So I've got a ton of things going on. I've got a ghostwriting client going. I am going to launch my next book in October and learning how to screenwrite.
Oh, wow, that's so cool. Now, did you take a course in how to screenwrite, or are you working with someone on that?
I had years ago taken like kind of an introductory, very basic screenwriting course through the local university here.
Oh, right.
But I didn't even like write an actual screenplay for the like there was no projects or anything. We just kind of learned the basics. And I thought that would be something interesting to kind of know about. And then I had the opportunity to talk to a producer about my first book, Cedar Ridge, and they were interested in the possibility of maybe seeing if a streaming company would be interested in it. So I'm working with a producer to write the screenplay for that first book.
Oh, well, that's so cool.
It's exciting and it's so interesting. It's such a different thing from any other writing that I've ever done.
Yeah, very different format from novels. And yes, right. Yeah. I took 2 or 3 playwriting classes when I was getting my master's, but I didn't ever write a whole entire, if I did, it was a 1-act play. Yeah. So, yeah, it's so different. And so it's always funny when people read a book and then they see the miniseries or the television show or the movie and they say, it's nothing like the book. Well, I'm sorry, but it's 2 different mediums.
Oh, way. Yeah.
The television movies are visual.
Yes.
And you have to have all those visual elements. Yeah.
Right. And they've got like a compacted amount of time. You have the luxury when you're writing your book to just write just write it,
Right.
write however long it needs to be. And there's like prescribed page count and word count if you want to fit within a certain genre. But in general, right now, writers can pretty much do their own thing and do what they want.
Right.
And when it comes to a screenplay, nope, you got to cram it down all into 100 pages.
Yeah. Yeah, because you only have if it's a movie, you only have about 2 hours. But
Yeah,
even if it's a mini series, you only get 6 episodes.
right. And those individual episodes only have like an hour, right?
Right.
And so,
Yeah, most of the time, yeah. Now there are some that have 10,
mhm,
if it's a series, like we're watching Foundation,
mhm.
and it's based on a series of books. And of
Yeah.
course, Outlander is a series of
Oh,
books.
yeah.
Outlander's so dense, though. I don't know how they cram all that stuff into 10 episodes. I've only seen like the first 4 seasons or something,
Uh-huh.
but there's so much that goes on, and you have to be selective.
I have a whole new appreciation now. I mean, I was one of those people who was such a purist. And if I
Mhm.
read the book and then saw the movie or even the miniseries, I was so disappointed. And how could they do that to this story I love? And now you're right. You really have to be like very economical with your word choices and just like very focused on what do you need to get across to the
Mhm.
viewer. And it's a
Mhm.
different type of it engages you. I didn't appreciate this either. It engages your imagination in a different type of way. You need to pick up on if you're viewing a movie, you
Mhm.
really should do it justice by picking up on all the like little things and the subtext and the actors like reactions and emotions. And
Mhm. Mhm.
I just never used to do that. I just used to like
Mhm.
turn on a movie and entertain me.
Right. Well, I used to teach a class called dramatic structure, and it was all about how the story was put, how the movie or the play, we didn't ever watch television shows, but how the movie or the play was put together to get the theme across.
Right.
And so, and sometimes they do these interesting things with structure. One of the ones I used to show was Cloud Atlas, and I don't know if you've read that book, but it has 6 timelines.
Yeah, it does.
And
It
the way
covers a lot.
Yeah, and the way they do it in the book is the 1849, I think it is, timeline begins and ends the book. And
Mhm.
it goes, in succession through the time periods
Yeah.
till you get to the middle, which is the very far future dystopian timeline. And
Mhm.
the way they structured the movie was very different. And, also listening to the podcasts about Foundation, they changed a lot
Yeah.
about the stories. But what the guy who created the series, uh, I think his name is Robert S. Goyer. I think his first name is Robert. He said he had read all the books. And
Mhm.
what they did was they took themes from the books and
Okay.
then they worked it out. So, because, you have to think about, excuse me, you have to think about the actors
Mhm.
well, they didn't want to have different because it's different characters. Each book has different characters. They didn't want to do that
Yeah.
because they wanted to keep the same actors for
Actors.
throughout the whole. So they had to figure out a way to do that. To keep the themes of the books
Mhm.
and keep the actors the same actors. And so I just thought that was fascinating to hear how they all the writers in the writers room, and he's part of the writers team, even
Yes.
though he's the creator of it. um how they came up with the ideas of to do justice to the themes of the books
Mhm.
and still be able to have the same, because most of the actors don't want to do just one season and then not be able to
Right.
do it. They won't You won't be able to get them to sign a contract.
And
So,
too, though, when you come across a project that you really like and want to do, you want to see it through, for the long haul.
mhm.
I could imagine. I mean, as a writer, if someone were to come to me and say, "Hey, we just want you to write one season of this," I'd be like, I want to be in on the whole thing.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. So, I mean, that series is kind of unique in that it doesn't have the same characters all the time throughout
Right.
all the books. But something like Louise Penny's, the very first one is called Still Life, but they just had the first season of, I think it's named for the town, Twin, not Twin Peaks, Twin Pines or something like that.
Mhm.
Oh dear, I'm saying the name wrong. She, that has the same main character throughout the whole entire series. So
Yeah.
that's a different situation than
Yes.
yeah,
Yes.
Foundation.
There's just like so much you can do. Like,
Mm.
and with my series Cedar Ridge, I intend on each book being a standalone, so it's going to focus on different characters, but the same characters are going to be like throughout. Does that make sense? Because it's a town, so you've got the same townspeople. It's just
Right.
that each book is going to focus on a different, like maybe one or two people. And you're going to see characters from the other books come in and
Yeah.
interact. But so that's how I'm kind of approaching mine.
Right. Yeah. Well, Bridgerton's like that too. I watched the first season of Bridgerton and then I went and got all the books and read all of them. And it's about the same family, but each book is about a different child, different sibling
Okay,
and
yeah,
their relationship with and how they get married, how it ends
yeah,
up they get married. But the other siblings come in,
yeah,
but it's mostly about the the sibling couple and
right.
they're who they're in love with. Yeah, so it's just interesting how they do, how they do
Mhm,
translate books to series or a
mhm,
series of movies
right.
or even like with the MCU and DC how they take these comic book characters
Yeah,
and then expand the universe and
right.
have them interact with each other and
Yeah, I really enjoyed that. I liked seeing that a lot in the
yeah.
movies. You didn't necessarily see a lot in the actual comics. So, but
Yeah.
and that's another thing that I was going to say that just like occurred to me while we were talking is when you're writing your novel, you you keep wanting to perfect it. I mean,
Mhm.
you could edit and re-edit and rewrite forever and never
Mhm.
publish it
Mhm.
because you can always make it better, and you always can. But there's
Mhm.
going to be a point where you just say, "No, this is good enough,"
Mhm.
and you publish. But being able to be involved in writing the screenplay, I get to like do a little more of that perfecting and tweaking and
Mhm.
things that it didn't occur to me when I wrote the book, but now I can do this here.
Right.
So I really appreciate being involved in the screenwriting.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Plus, it's really fun when the actors get there and the director, and then they have their input, and that makes you think of, oh, wow, yeah, I could add that. We could add that to this
Yes,
story. Yeah. And
yes.
that's one thing I really enjoyed about dramatic structure is we talk about the movie or the play after,
Mhm.
and then sometimes students would say things that I had never thought of before. Eh, I loved it, you know.
Yeah, you're like, that never even occurred to me. I know.
Right.
I'm finding that a lot in writing this. I've got a critique partner who
Mhm,
writes screenplays as well, but then I meet with the producer probably
mhm,
monthly.
mhm,
And in both situations, just talking it through and brainstorming and
mhm,
going over what's already been written. It's
mhm.
we all I always have like a light bulb moment where I'm like, I never thought of that. That's wonderful. Yes, let's do that. And
Yeah.
you're right, she wouldn't say that. She would say this. And
Right. Yeah.
it's just so fun and so interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, actors have this thing about they've done all this research about the backgrounds of the characters,
Mhm.
and sometimes they do come up with stuff, an emotional bent or something that's happening in that scene that maybe the playwriters or the director or didn't even think of before.
Right. And that's another thing is this is such a collaboration when you're writing a novel, when you're writing a book. Typically, unless you're ghostwriting, like I do that too, but typically my own stuff is just me in my office,
Right.
writing down my own stuff.
Mm.
And I love working with critique partners because they do that for me too, as far as, making comments and suggestions that maybe it didn't occur to me, or I'm not reading this in this way. Is this what you meant?
Yeah.
So that's always useful and helpful. But in general, the point I'm trying to make is that novel writing is very like solitary, and collaborating on something like a screenplay is such a team effort. And it even does extend, like you were pointing out, to the director and the actors. And something that I thought was interesting when I first got into this area is I took a few, they weren't really courses, they were just like meetings with people who were preparing me to meet with producers and other people in the industry. And they were just really home, you need to be open to, whatever other people have to say about this. You can't have your hands tied on your story and be like, no, the lead character has to be blonde.
Right.
What if what if the perfect actress for this isn't a blonde? And what if it's not believable for her to wear a wig or dye her hair? What if she's perfect as she is? What if, just all these other little elements that maybe you feel so protective of because it's your story, it's your baby. And I didn't ever approach it like that. I was just like, if you guys are interested, I am so open to whatever you have to say. And that's what's made this so easy, I think, and what's been fun for me.
Yeah. Oh, that's so great. I love it. I love that. So how did this all come about?
You know what? I kind of have to say I'm not 100% sure. I took it's funny because I was in a accountability group, where we meet like weekly and say, yeah, I hit this goal, I hit that goal, whatever. And the lady who was leading it said, you know what? I just really see you possibly getting your stories on the big screen, and I was like, oh yes, that would be great. And I really did not think that would happen.
Right.
And I said, yeah, that would be great. And a couple weeks, it was a very short time later, I got an email like soliciting for me to sign up for like a screenwriting course, but it also was in conjunction with essentially how to sell your screenplay.
Oh.
And I thought, well, that's interesting. And I just was talking to Robin and she said, so maybe I should look into that. So I took that, and within that like framework, they had like these different production companies that you could contact. So I did. And they ended up being interested enough to at least allow me to schedule a time with a producer. And the very first producer I talked to was very interested and said, yeah, I really think this is an idea that could sell. But the way you've written the book, it cannot be lifted directly out of the book and into a screenplay. So you're going to need to hire a screenwriter. And there were two things that I had a problem with that. The first one was the cost, because it could be 15,000 or more. 15,000 is bottom tier.
Right.
But the second thing is, honestly, I wanted to do this. That's why I had signed up to begin with, to learn how to write a screenplay and learn how to sell my screenplay. So I kind of just like politely declined. And I said, well, that's not doable at this time. But I guess they were interested enough in the concept of the book to contact me later and say, if you are interested in writing it, we could team you up with a producer and a screenwriter, and you could write it. It's their like mentoring, I guess. And I was like, yeah, that's what I really want to do. I want to do that.
Yeah.
So it unfolded in a really strange way, but the way it did unfold, it just makes me feel like kind of it was meant to be,
Right.
Because I just had that friend just kind of mention it casually, and like it was, oh yeah, this is going to happen, and it just did.
Wow. Yeah. Wow. So you don't belong to obviously, you don't belong to the writers
I don't,
guild.
and I am so like not tuned into the news. So that was like barely on my radar. I kind of knew about it somewhere in the back of my brain, didn't even really know the issues. I couldn't even understand them really because I hadn't researched it or looked into it. And I have learned a little bit more about it since. But in the meantime, I'm not officially a screenwriter. I mean, maybe if this is something the producer I talked to said, oh, you're going to end up, this is all you're going to want to do is writing screenplays. And I thought, well, if I can sell them, then yeah, I want to. And so that's something I'll probably look into. But, and I don't know if this is where you were going with this, but I guess the biggest issue or one of the huge issues in this strike is the concern over what AI could do to screenwriting in general, and screenwriters' abilities to make a living at this. There was a time when like screenwriters could write, if you had written at least one really big hit, people would be like bidding for your next screenplay unwritten, or maybe it's outlined and they'll just bid on the outline and then have you write it and make millions. Millions. And now I guess that's not how it is anymore. And I had never really followed that because I that's not what I did, or even currently that's not what I officially do, like just for my the only thing I do. But I can definitely see the concern, and I absolutely, I mean, I just don't think that from what I've seen from AI now, there's no way that it can replace like the imagination and the thought process of a human. And it can do now a passable job that you can give to somebody and have them tweak it and perfect it. But I definitely see the need for what we do to be valued.
Well, what I actually was going to was you get to keep working on this. And then when the strike is over, you may be able to join the union. The WGA. I don't know. I mean, I know there are lots of benefits for, like, I have a friend who is a professional actor. He's a stage actor. So he belongs to Equity. Well, he's also a director and does stage managing. So he belongs to Equity. And there are certain advantages to that because he has health insurance, which is really great because he has health issues. It is in the contract, with the union,
the guild,
you have to get a certain amount of pay for certain jobs, so and with the actors and writers, I think that the other concern is that now with all these streaming services, because when it was just the 3 or 4 networks or however many networks, if your show became really popular and it went into rerun
syndication,
you got all of the you got residual income from that. Now with the streaming services, they don't get that. For some reason, the way the contracts are written or something, well, like YouTube can show these sections of television shows or even an episode, and the actor doesn't get a paycheck for that. So that's some of the issue as well. And I don't know, I'm a really big fan of classic movies. And I know that there was a time when they had all the silent films were going and it was independent film companies and everybody was making money. And then the big conglomerates came in, not as big as now, but there was a New York office and an LA office, and the money people came in, and actors were put under contract for so many years, and it was what's called the studio system. And Olivia de Havilland was the very first one, I think, that did this.
Mhm.
She sued her studio because they wanted her to do these certain movies that she didn't want to do, and she had to work certain hours. It was like slave labor, basically.
Uh-huh.
And she took them to court and won.
Good.
And it's still called the de Havilland decision.
Mhm.
And there were other actors that did that same thing. Like I think Gregory Peck was one, and maybe Cary Grant and Katharine Hepburn, who didn't want to be assigned after a certain amount of time. They didn't want to be assigned to one specific
Yeah.
studio. And so they wanted to be a free agent. So,
Right.
but some of them had to, go to court about that.
Mhm.
And so we're at another time and then things started to change in the 50s and 60s with the studio system. It started to break down. And now we're at another point where that industry is going through a huge change.
Right. Right.
So, yeah.
Definitely. And kind of getting back to your original point, that is something that I had on my radar that, right now I'm learning this.
Mm-hmm.
And by the time this is done in a couple months,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know where all of that's going to be, but yeah, then I've positioned myself to possibly reap the benefits of that. And I don't even know all the benefits of joining the guild, but I do know, like, of some, just from
Mm-hmm.
having read books. It's just, yeah, it's definitely a benefit. That's a possibility, just from trying this other different type of writing that has come
Mm-hmm.
across my path.
Oh, that's great. So then you can write the books and then do the screenplays for the series. And yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, that
yeah.
sounds fun. That sounds
I know, doesn't it?
Mhm.
Isn't it cool when you love something and you get to do that?
Yes. Well, that's the way I feel about my podcast.
Mhm.
And I love it so much that I just recently moved my podcast to a new host so that I could, spread it
Yes.
farther afield.
Wonderful. That's
But
great.
also what I did was Apple has a subscription thing that you can do. And Barry and I started this little extra episodes for only the subscribers. We've only
Uh-huh.
done 2 or 3 so far.
Yeah.
And I call it Baby Boomers Take on ... And we're going to talk about different things. So we decided to start talking about the MCU to begin with. But we'll probably talk about a lot of the things that I wanted to talk about are suggestions from nieces and nephews, like the Harry Potter series, the
Mhm.
Hunger Games series. Well, the MCU is definitely a suggestion from one of our nephews.
Yeah.
And, and then we might expand into classic movies and who knows. But yeah, so I just love talking about stories.
Yeah.
The if the story is already created, then I would be okay with doing what you're doing,
Mhm.
writing it into a screenplay kind of a thing. But
Mhm.
yeah, the sometimes the creation part of my novel is difficult.
Oh,
Coming
yeah.
up with the ideas of what's going to happen to the characters and so on and so
Well,
forth.
and then you get into that, and maybe you've seen it go a certain direction, and you get into that, and the story just won't go in that direction.
Right. Exactly. Well, I was talking to, what is her name? I love her books. I've just discovered this series of books. I'm going to look her up. And uh, she she had written a bunch of like Jane Austen offshoot kind of
Okay.
books.
I think I know who you're talking about. Yeah.
And then she came up with the idea of Maria Grace is her name.
Okay. Maria
And
Gray.
she came up with the idea of mashing up Jane Austen with dragons
Oh my gosh.
instead of zombies, which I don't like zombies. So I was like, dragons, I love dragons.
Yes.
So I talked to her for Patreon, and now I'm going to have her be a guest on Story Power as well. But she was saying, sometimes she gets stuck on where the story should go, and she has to go off and cook or take a walk or whatever.
Mhm.
And then somebody will say something, and it will go, and she'll go, "Oh, that's it. That's what I can do in my," you know. That's kind of what happens to me. I have
Mhm.
the story in the back of my head, and then somebody will say something or do something, and or something will happen in a show that I'm watching, and I'll go, oh, I could put that in my book. And I just got some ideas. I haven't been working on my novel recently because I'm putting all of my Story Power episodes on YouTube, and you
Okay.
have to have some sort of a visual to go with that. So I've been putting them on iMovie and putting, visuals with it. And I have 80 something episodes now.
Oh my goodness.
And
Oh,
so I only have 12 episodes up so far. And yeah, I just started working on the 2021 episodes. So it's going to take me a little while to do that. And so I've kind of set my novel aside while
yeah, that's a project.
that's all. I'm hoping by the end of the year, maybe I'll be caught up so that when I publish it on Libsyn and my blog,
Mhm.
then I can also put it up in YouTube at the same
That,
time.
that will be wonderful.
I know they all be the same process, that'll be part of
Mhm.
my process for publishing an episode. So, oh dear, yes. But yeah, so I love the way the universe works, and
Yes.
you get ideas. You get ideas
Hmm.
with writing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, they come from everywhere, but you're right. There's always a point where you reach kind of like a stopping point,
Mhm.
more than a speed bump. You're just like, I got nothing. And
Mhm.
yeah, then the idea to get going again just seems to come out of nowhere where you're not even thinking about it.
Right.
Or maybe you are kind of mulling it over, but something happens at that moment and
Right.
you're like, "Oh, this will
Right.
fit perfect."
Yeah, that's why I'm not sure I would be able to be on deadline with
Yeah.
a publisher,
Yeah.
because I'm like Emma Thompson. She says I'm a really slow writer. And so when she was talking about Sense and Sensibility, she goes, "I'm a really slow writer. It took me a long time to write the screenplay." And I'm like that too. I'm a slow writer. I
Good days and bad days. And
Mhm.
I really, really resonate with that, with both you and Emma, because I I really wanted this one editor, and I kept
Mhm.
thinking, I've got to get in with an editor. I've got to do that because
Mhm.
their schedules are worse than ours.
Mhm.
And I contacted the one I wanted, the one who had edited my first book, and she was on maternity leave, and then she
Mhm.
wasn't sure when she was going to come back, and so I tried to find another one, and I just wasn't finding anybody I really clicked with. I mean, nobody that was horrible, people that could have
Right.
done it, but I really like working with Rochelle Ray Cobb, and
Mhm.
so I just kind of just as a last ditch, when I really was finally finished with my manuscript, I contacted her and said, "Are you ready? Are you coming back to work? Because this is finally ready." And
Mhm.
I haven't found anybody else. But my whole point about that is, if I had found somebody else and set a date, I would have missed it. I wouldn't have
Mhm.
been able to hit the mark. And
Yeah.
you're right. The universe works in a wonderful way, because she was coming back to work right when my manuscript was finished and ready for an editor.
Oh,
And I think
good.
mine was the first one she took on after she had come back from maternity leave. So
Wow,
I
that's
said,
great.
in the future, I will try and plan this out, but for
Yeah.
now, I just,
Yeah, right.
I
Yeah.
can't do it. I'm not a good deadline hitter.
No, me either. So now I wanted to know if you are planning on like continuing writing your novels and working the ghostwriting thing for a while longer.
Oh yeah, yeah. I'm kind of just like going with the flow, seeing what
Mhm.
happens. What's really cool about how this worked out
Mhm.
was the projects have started in a staggered kind of
Oh.
situation.
Uh-huh.
I was just finishing up my novel when we kind of started talking about, the second novel.
Mhm.
When we started about adapting the first novel for a screenplay, and we were just talking about that.
Right.
And in the meantime, I got my next ghostwriting client, and I do coaching and ghostwriting. Like if somebody wants to do all the writing themselves, they just need somebody to help them out. I do that. And
Mhm.
that's much easier. That doesn't take as much time from me.
Mhm.
But I got a ghostwriting client who actually had written a novel that she knew was not publishable, and she wanted me to make it into something that she could publish.
Mhm.
So I started working on that. And just a little ways in from that, I mean, I think maybe I'd been working with her for a month, and
Mhm.
then this screenplay went green light. Let's go ahead and do it.
Mhm. Mhm.
So then I got started on that like another month in. So I'm finishing up a novel. I'm starting with a ghostwriting client, and then I started on the screenplay. And what's really worked out nicely is that the milestones are hitting so that I can turn in what I've done with the client's novel to her and have her go over it. That gives me an entire week free to do, not free, but
Right.
to like split my attention to focus on the screenplay.
Mhm.
Then I turn it in to the producer, and
Mhm.
that gives me not quite a week, but it gives me some free time to then focus intensely on the ghostwriting project again.
Mhm.
And so it's just kind of like, flowing, coming and going.
Mhm.
And between all of this, I've been doing the little things that need tying up on the novel, like
Mhm.
getting the cover done,
Mhm.
and what else? Oh, sending out like the art copies and things like that,
Mhm.
getting like last minute suggestions from critique partners.
Mhm.
And so it's worked up to this point, at least, very well.
Oh, that's
And
great.
I do want to keep doing all of it because I love working with ghostwriting clients,
Mhm.
because I mean, they've got this book or this story, and they just want to get it out, and they don't know how.
Mhm.
I do. So hey, yeah, I would love to help you.
Mhm.
So I love that type of work. I love my stories because, Lucinda, you've got these stories in your head. You've
Mhm.
got a file folder full of ideas of stories you
Mhm.
want to write. I love that.
Mhm.
And then now it turns out I really am enjoying screenwriting. So I'm learning that, and it's not like, oh, a one-off. I learned that. That was fun. No, I think the producer was right. I think this is going to be something I want to do all the time now. I know how.
Yeah. But it's nice to have more than one stream of income.
Oh, very much. Yes.
And that's kind of why I did the subscription with Apple, because I eventually I'll have subscribers and that will be a little stream of income. And,
Yeah.
if I can get more people to be patrons on Patreon, that'll be another little stream of income. And when I have more followers for Story Power, then I can have sponsors or something too.
Right.
So it'll be more than one stream of income. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. That is a wonderful like little bonus and side effect.
Hmm.
And also, again, the fact that I love doing all this and for different reasons, and that
Hmm.
it allows me to be creative in different ways,
Hmm.
is really just like so energizing. And I mean,
Yeah.
I love it. I told somebody the other day, I have never worked harder in my life or really enjoyed myself so much.
I know. But you know what I used to say to my acting students, because this was my experience when I was an actor, is yes, it's a lot of work, but it is so much fun.
So much fun. And that makes it rewarding.
Mhm. Mhm.
I mean, and entertainment. I think that's what I enjoy. The rewarding part of the ghostwriting business is seeing the person who I work with. They've published their book. They are so excited and proud to have their name on that book.
Mhm.
And so to present them with something that they're going to be proud to publish,
Mhm.
that's the reward there.
Yes.
When I write my novels, I write fiction 100%, and it's because it's an escape for me.
Mhm.
And I love hearing from readers that it's an escape for them, that they
Mhm.
just really look forward to that time where they can just like check out of everything else and dive
Mhm.
into my little world and enjoy what I've had to say. So that's the
Yes.
reward there. And now I
Yes.
get to see this, taking those stories and being rewarded in a different way, seeing them come to people and have them enjoy it, being
Mhm.
entertained in a whole different way
Yeah.
with screenplays.
Well, and it's going to be fun if you get to be on the set and watching it come alive as they are
Yeah.
filming it. Uh, filming a movie is different usually, unless
Mm.
you're Alfred Hitchcock, who sometimes did it from beginning to end. But because you only see a little segment, and then you
Right.
might be seeing a segment from earlier in the or later. But it's different than a play, which I'm used to. You start the
Yeah.
play and you go all the way through. But that's a fun process too.
Mhm.
And it sounds so exciting. That sounds exciting. I mean, I've done little things on film, but
Mhm.
then not a whole movie or anything. So
Right.
that sounds really fun.
Right. Yeah. It's going to be an experience for sure.
Yeah, that's great. I love it. I love that for you.
Thank you so much.
So I'm sorry that we got cut off yesterday, and I'm glad that we got to reconnect this morning because I
Absolutely.
wanted to find out if there was anything else you wanted to say.
Well, we had been talking about like the benefits of different streams of income and
Mhm.
branching out into different types. And what I love is that all of all of the things that I've got my hands in
Mhm.
are creative things that well, first of all, feed me, feed my soul,
Mhm.
feed my spirit. But I really think that they feed each other, and in a way that that comparison of honing a knife or a blade against stone. Do you
Mhm.
know what I'm saying? That
Yeah, right.
the different skills that I need to build for each one actually serves as building as a whole for all of it.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And although I do have to definitely have a different mindset when I'm ghostwriting for someone else, I have to get into their head and
Mhm.
write their story and be
Mhm.
very careful not to make it mine or to
Mhm.
take over.
Mhm.
And then when I'm working on my own things and I'm able to just let it flow and do whatever I want,
Mhm.
and then shifting gears even more to do screenwriting, because even though that can be my story, I haven't yet worked on somebody else's story as far as a screenplay goes, but I'm just seeing that it's a very different type of writing, a very different type of mindset. But these little like differences within each type
Mhm.
has tended to make me more well, just better in general when I'm writing the other ones,
Oh, right. Uh-huh.
because become more aware of certain elements
Yeah. Uh-huh.
within.
Mhm.
And then even though it's not exactly the same when you're, I don't know if I'm making much sense now that I'm rambling on, but
No,
even though it's
you
not
are.
exactly the same within the others, it still has sharpened, I guess, just my awareness of
Mhm.
what's making a good story. Maybe
Yes.
that's it.
Yes, I like that. No, you weren't. I don't think you were rambling. I think you're right that the more skills we gain in different kinds of writing help our writing in general. Yeah.
Definitely. I even
Yeah.
had a critique partner tell me, it was so funny. She was like the last one looking at this new novel coming out. And I
Mhm.
had actually already even sent it to the editor, and she was still and my critique partner was still sending me input.
Mhm.
And she's like, I just have seen the progress throughout the writing of this novel. I've just really seen you improve as a writer. And
Mhm. Mhm.
that meant so much to me, and that felt really good.
Mhm.
And then again, when I got to thinking about it, I'm like, okay, but during the progress of writing this novel, look at all these other areas that I've gotten my hands into,
Right.
and look at all these other types of writing that I have
Mhm.
um, started to get into or continued to hone and
Yeah.
continue to learn. And so I believe that this next book is going to be really good, but I just hope that like the first to the last all like gels, and it's not like you start reading it and you're like, oh, I'm gonna have to push myself through. But then by the time you get to the end, it's really good.
Yeah.
I think it'll be good, but that's just what I've seen is stretching myself in other areas have just really helped me in general, as well as within those different areas.
Yes. Well, your book, it probably isn't like that, but I have had those kind of books where it's like the middle part's kind of boring. And that's exactly what the two women who are now both dead, unfortunately,
Oh,
helped
cool.
me with my first book was that it slows down in the middle and you got to tighten it up and get rid of some stuff. And I have heard playwrights and screenwriters say the second act is the hardest one to write. And that's the middle of the book,
It is. It
So,
is.
so yeah, but yours probably isn't like that because now you're working on screenwriting and you get that the middle part has to be all this conflict, which then in the last part of the screenplay gets resolved. And yeah,
Tie it up in a nice bow so that everybody's happy.
yeah.
Another thing occurred to me when you were saying that, and I don't want to take credit for this technique. And I wish that I had immediate recall on who it was that came up with it. So I apologize if it's you, if it's somebody who knows who it is. I'm not taking credit for this, but it's an interesting concept that I've started to take into consideration, and that's in starting your story in the middle. I mean, in your head at least. Of course, you're gonna like outline it or do whatever you need to do to set up your story so that you can write it. But to start thinking about it in the middle, what's going to be the turning point? And then writing, not necessarily backwards, but working towards that and then working away from that. Because usually you know how you want it to start and how you want it to end. And you're right, the middle is so messy.
It is messy. Well, and sometimes, well, this has happened to me more than once. I get this idea and it's this like this is what happened with my second book. I woke up one morning, it was the you know how it is when you're just waking up, and I had this scene in my head where Jenna in the present is in her office writing, the nanny's with her little daughter, her toddler daughter, and somebody throws a rock through the window and it hits the daughter in the head.
Oh my gosh.
And because she is part of, I wanted her to be part of the new women's movement, and I started that book when it was in 2014. There was nothing going on with the women's movement then. And so, but that was the first scene that came into my head was her daughter gets hurt because of what she's been writing and, her involvement in whatever movement. And so it was like, oh, that probably should go in the middle of the book.
Yeah.
But I'm still struggling with it because, we haven't got there yet.
Right.
And so I'm trying to project where we could go. And that's
what's so interesting. That's I guess that's how I approach any of the stories that I write is the what if,
right.
Or the what then, because you've got your scene,
right.
Build it around that. What then?
Right. Yeah. Right. So, and that's kind of how I get my ideas. I'm cooking or I'm waking up in the morning and that's when the ideas come, or I'm watching some television show or reading another book and I'm going, or someone says something to me and then I get my idea. I'm a little bit like, I love the movie, The Man Who Invented Christmas about Charles Dickens, because because that's what happens to him. He's doing these lectures for his books. And one of the characters says to him, something about why are you always talking to us about the lower classes and how they need help. And, this is a rich guy.
Right.
Because they could build themselves up. They could pull themselves up by the bootstraps like I did and be a success. And so part of the conversation is, well, then why don't they die and reduce the surplus population? And Dickens, as soon as the guy leaves, he's writing that down in his book.
Yeah, let's write that down.
Because he's trying to work on a Christmas Carol, which he actually wrote in like 6 weeks
Uh-huh.
and then published it, late
That's amazing.
in the fall. And yeah, so, things like that happen to us writers,
Oh yeah,
all the time. Yeah.
for sure. And as
Well,
far as the waking up with that idea, I tried the trick of putting a notepad by my bedside.
mhm.
I could never make heads or tails of what I wrote the next day.
I know. Well, yeah, right, because it's dark and
And you're awake. You're like,
I know, right? Yeah. Well, fortunately, it's right when I'm waking up in the morning,
good.
and then I can go and, work on
Do
it.
something with it, something legible. Good. I need to
Right.
train myself to do that.
Yeah.
Have the ideas later when I'm more like cognizant and can write.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Oh, I am so happy to talk to you again, and thank you so much for being my guest.
Of course, of course. I love talking with you, Lucinda. That was another thing I was thinking of this morning before we talked. Is like, I just so enjoy our conversations. So
Yeah. We should
anytime, whether you want to like tape it or not, call me. I would love to talk with you.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you for the permission to do that because sometimes I tend not to ask for help from people and
Mhm.
so it would be good to have somebody to go to and say, I'm really struggling with this thing, whatever it
Yes.
is, whatever it
Okay,
is.
open invitation.
Okay, great.
Don't even think about it twice. Just reach out.
Oh, good. Thank you so much. I'm really looking forward to publishing this because I'm hoping that people will, you know, jump out and do the thing that they love,
Yes.
like you're doing.
Yes.
You know,
You really can do it. Sometimes it seems, at the beginning, oh, can I do this? How am I going to make it work? Don't even worry about the how. Honestly, I mean, that it might sound like, oh yeah, that's easy for you to say. You're on that side of it. But really, thinking back, I can't even tell you how I got here.
right?
I just did it. I just did what I want to do. It took me 2 years to get my first book out, and another 2 years that this one is finally coming out.
Yeah.
But the things that I was doing in between have changed so that now I'm not having to fit my own writing around a schedule of going to an office and working for
Right.
somebody else.
Right.
I'm fitting it around a schedule of I'm working with people that I want to work with on projects that really excite me.
Mm-hmm.
I
Yeah.
mean, just take a little bit of a tiny baby step and just do it, and you'll be amazed at what happens.
I know. Because the next step presents itself. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Right. Oh, thank you again, Lisa. That's been
Thank
fun.
you. It has. Wonderful.
I hope you enjoyed the show. If you like what you heard, please share it with a friend and give us a rating and/or review on your favorite podcast app. It will help people find us. I invite you to join my Patreon community at patreon.com/storypower, all one word. Or if you like, you can subscribe to Story Power on Apple Podcasts. It's my aim to build a community where we discuss the stories we love and talk about what we learned from them. I offer extra audio content and story suggestions to my patrons on both platforms. Remember, as Philip Pullman said, after nourishment, shelter, and companionship, stories are the thing we need most in the world. Let's spread the story love. Until next time, this is Lucinda Sage-Midgorden. Thanks for listening.